The first time I kissed him, I was sure the universe was laughing at us. Maybe it was the cruel joke of falling for someone in a town that worshipped Sunday sermons more than it valued breathing. Or maybe it was just that love always seemed ridiculous when you had to hide it in the shadows. But I swear to God, the moment his lips touched mine, I knew this was the only kind of truth I ever wanted to live. His name was Caleb, the boy every parent in Riverton pointed to when they whispered to their sons, "Be more like him." He was the golden one. Captain of the football team, polite to every grandmother in church, the type of man who shook hands with firm conviction. And me? I was just Luke, the quiet kid who fixed cars in his uncle's garage. The one everyone suspected had too much softness in his eyes. We weren't supposed to collide, not in any way that mattered. But life in a small American town has a funny way of trapping people until all the pressure makes something crack. I met Caleb not in the glow of Friday night lights, not during one of those high school moments that feel like they should define your life, but years later, after we'd both been swallowed whole by this place. I was under the hood of a rusted Ford when he walked in, his presence so sudden and heavy that I smacked my head on the damn metal. "Jesus, Luke," he laughed, his voice the same low, steady sound that used to make girls blush in the hallways. "You always did have a way of hurting yourself." I wanted to tell him that wasn't the only way I hurt. The truth? I'd been in love with Caleb since I was 16. But in Riverton, love like mine wasn't just discouraged, it was erased, denied, condemned. And Caleb? He was the last person who could afford a rumor. Yet here he was, standing in my garage, watching me with eyes that seemed older than I remembered, eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd been pretending for far too long. That night we went out for a drink. One beer turned into 4, laughter melting away the years like we hadn't been strangers at all. And when we stumbled out into the chilled night air, the words slipped from his lips like they'd been choking him forever. "I can't keep pretending, Luke." I thought I misheard him. The Caleb everyone worshipped, the Caleb who had been the epitome of small-town perfection, was looking at me like I was the only person who mattered. He kissed me under the neon sign of Miller's Bar, his hands trembling against my jacket like he was both terrified and free all at once. And in that kiss, I tasted every secret we'd swallowed, every silent longing buried beneath years of lies. But here's the thing about small towns. They notice everything. The whispers started before sunrise. By the time I opened the garage the next morning, Mrs. Henderson from across the street was already staring too long, her lips pursed with disapproval. By noon, people were looking at Caleb differently at the diner. By evening, his father's truck was parked in front of my uncle's garage. The man didn't yell. He didn't have to. His silence was a wall. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. Caleb stood behind him, his face pale, his shoulders stiff with shame and something else, something like defiance. "You're going to forget this nonsense," his father finally said, spitting the word nonsense like it was poison. "You're going to remember who you are." But the thing is, Caleb had already remembered. That night, he showed up at my apartment, rain-soaked and shaking. He looked like a boy who had run from everything: his family, his church, his own reflection. And yet, when he stepped inside and wrapped his arms around me, I knew he hadn't run away at all. He had run to me. I didn't need him to say it, but he did anyway. "I love you, Luke." The words nearly broke me. We kissed until the storm outside quieted, until the thunder became nothing more than a lullaby. And for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to believe in a future that wasn't built on hiding. But Riverton wasn't going to let us go unscathed. Not yet. The next week was hell: sideways glances, muttered insults, the church sermon that might as well have had our names plastered across the pulpit. Caleb lost his job at the hardware store. I caught kids throwing rocks at the garage sign. My uncle stopped looking me in the eyes. We were burning alive in the fire of our own truth. And still Caleb held my hand beneath the diner table. He brushed his thumb across my knuckles when no one was looking. He whispered promises in the dark that maybe, just maybe, love could outlast the hate. What neither of us knew was how much the town was willing to push back, how far it would go to break us apart. And it all came crashing down the night of the 4th of July parade. By the time the fireworks began crackling over Riverton's main street, I knew the night was going to change everything. Caleb stood beside me, his shoulders stiff, jaw tight, as if he was holding back an entire war inside him. The carnival lights flickered red, white, and blue across his face, making him look both beautiful and broken. Around us, families sat on lawn chairs, kids darted with sparklers in their hands, and the air smelled like cotton candy and gunpowder. But I couldn't see any of it. I could only see him. His hand brushed mine once, by accident or maybe not. And in that fleeting touch, I felt every unspoken promise, every risk, every fragile hope. My heart hammered so loud I thought it might rise above the band's patriotic tune. I leaned close enough that my shoulder grazed his. "You don't have to do anything tonight," I whispered, almost begging. He turned to me, and in his eyes, I saw a storm I'd never seen before. Not fear, not shame, but something fiercer. "Yes, I do." Before I could stop him, he reached for my hand. The world didn't end in that moment, but it sure felt like it might. Around us, the crowd shifted. Whispers rose like smoke. A woman gasped. A man coughed hard enough to sound like disgust. Fireworks exploded overhead in streaks of gold and crimson. And there we were, two men holding hands in the middle of a town that had spent its whole life teaching us to disappear. I should have pulled away. God knows my instinct screamed for me to. But Caleb's grip was firm, almost desperate. And I realized he wasn't just holding my Honda, was holding his truth. And I couldn't let him do it alone. So I laced my fingers with his, tighter than I ever had. And together, we stood while the whole damn town stared. The fireworks burst louder, brighter, echoing off the brick buildings that had been the backdrop of our lives. In that light, we weren't hidden anymore. We were undeniable. But bravery has its cost. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of someone pounding on my apartment door. My stomach dropped, dread coiling tight as I opened it. Sheriff Daniels stood there, hat in hand, but no kindness in his eyes. "Luke," he said flatly, "mind if I come in?" I didn't mind, but he didn't wait for me to answer either. He stepped inside, scanning the small space like he was looking for proof of a crime. Maybe, in his eyes, love was exactly that. "You and Caleb caused quite the stir last night." His tone was low, measured, like a warning more than a statement. "Folks are concerned." I swallowed hard. "We didn't do anything wrong." "That's not the point." For a long moment, the sheriff just studied me, then sighed like I was a burden he didn't want to carry. "Word of advice? Tell Caleb to cool it down before his daddy makes life hell for both of you." He tipped his hat and left me standing in the doorway, heat crawling up my neck. By noon, the garage was empty of customers. By 3, I saw my uncle hammering a closed sign onto the door without a word to me. He didn't fire me outright, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. Caleb, meanwhile, was worse off. He came by that night, his eyes red, his shirt wrinkled like he hadn't slept. "They kicked me out." His voice cracked on the words. I froze. "Your parents?" He nodded, pressing a trembling hand to his forehead. "Said if I was gonna shame the family name, then I could do it on my own. My dad told me I wasn't his son anymore." Something inside me shattered hearing that. I pulled him into my arms, felt him shake against me, felt the weight of years of loyalty to people who could cut him down in an instant. "You've got me," I whispered fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere." His breath hitched. "I don't know if that's enough." But I knew it had to be, because if love wasn't enough, then what the hell was the point of any of this? For the next few weeks, we became ghosts in our own town. Some friends avoided us in public. Others sneered openly. The diner waitress, who used to give us extra fries, now dropped our plates like they were poison. And yet, every night, Caleb would show up at my place. We'd sit on the couch, knees pressed together, sharing takeout and silence. Sometimes we laughed until it felt like we were invincible. Other nights, we lay in bed, clinging to each other like the world outside was a storm that might never pass. One night, as rain tapped against the window, Caleb's voice broke the quiet. I keep thinking about leaving. My chest tightened. Leaving Rivorton? Leaving all of it. Starting over somewhere that doesn't hate us. His hand found mine under the blanket, fingers brushing nervously. Would you come with me? The thought was a flame I'd been afraid to touch. But with him looking at me like that, how could I say no? Anywhere, I breathed. As long as it's with you. For the first time in weeks, he smiled like he believed in tomorrow. But small towns don't let go of their ghosts so easily. The night it all came to a head. The air was thick with summer heat, heavy and suffocating. Caleb and I walked down Main Street, trying not to notice the stares. He slipped his hand into mine again, not caring who saw. And that was when a voice cut through the night like a blade. Disgusting. We froze. Across the street, a group of men stood outside the bar, beer bottles in hand, eyes sharp with something darker than disapproval. One of Thema broad man with a gut straining against his shirt's pat on the ground. You think you can shove that filth in our faces? Not in this town. Caleb's grip on my hand tightened. I could feel his pulse racing. Let's just go, I murmured. But before we could, the men stepped forward. And in that moment, I realized love wasn't just about holding hands under fireworks. It was about surviving the fire that came after. The men closed in, their footsteps crunching against the gravel as if the sound itself was meant to rattle us. Caleb's hand tightened on mine until my knuckles turned white. His body shifted slightly, putting himself in front of me in that quiet, instinctive way that made me want to scream and cry all at once. Stay behind me, he whispered, his voice low but steady. My throat was dry, but the stubbornness in me refused to stay hidden. No, if they want to fight, they'll have to go through both of us. The biggest man, his name was Hank. The kind of guy who'd been terrorizing this town since high school, took a swig from his bottle and sneered. You think you can parade around like that, holding hands in front of kids, families? You think you can shove your sickness in our faces? Caleb's jaw ticked. We're not hurting anyone. You're hurting this town. Hank lunged a step closer, and I instinctively flinched. But Caleb didn't move, didn't let go. His voice was sharp, louder now, cutting through the heavy night. What hurts this town isn't its people like you who think love is a crime. That only made them angrier. One of the men smashed his bottle against the curb, shards scattering like tiny stars across the pavement. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't going to end with words. Then, from somewhere behind us, a voice rang out. Enough! We all turned. Pastor Whitmore, of all people, stood at the edge of the sidewalk, his Bible clutched in one hand. His gray hair gleamed under the streetlight, his face pale but firm. For a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was going to protect us. That maybe all those sermons about love and forgiveness had finally found a place in his chest. But then he said, "This isn't the way. If you've got a problem with these boys, you take it to God. Not the street." It wasn't protection. It was control. He didn't care about us, cared about the town not turning into a headline. Still, his presence was enough to make the men hesitate. They muttered curses, tossed their bottles, and slunk back toward the bar, promising we hadn't seen the last of them. When they were gone, the pastor turned to us. His eyes were sharp, almost pitying. "You're making things harder than they have to be," he said quietly. Then he walked away, leaving us trembling in the glow of the broken streetlight. Caleb finally exhaled, shoulders sagging. He turned to me, his voice raw. "I can't keep living like this, Luke. Always waiting for the next fight, the next whisper." My chest ached. "Then let's leave. Let's get out of Rivorton tonight." His eyes flickered with longing, but also with something heavier. "And run forever? Keep looking over our shoulders?" I didn't have an answer. Not then. For days after, the town's silence was worse than its noise. People didn't yell anymore, they just looked away. We were ghosts in places we'd once belonged. The diner stopped serving us. The grocery store clerk acted like we weren't standing in front of her. Even my uncle stopped answering my calls. It was Caleb who finally broke. One evening, he showed up at my door with a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were lit with something fierce. "I'm done hiding." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He set the bag down and grabbed my hands. "The town has a council meeting tomorrow night. Everyone will be there. I'm going to stand up and tell the truth. About us. About me. About everything." My heart thudded painfully. "Caleb, that could ruin you." "It already has. They've taken my family, my job, my name. What else is there left to lose except you?" I wanted to beg him not to stay safe in the shadows with me where no one could touch us. But then I saw the way he was looking at me, like his whole life had been building toward this moment, and I knew I couldn't chain him to fear any longer. So I nodded, my throat thick. "Then I'll be right there with you." The next night, the town hall buzzed with bodies and voices, the air thick with judgment. I'd never felt so out of place in a room I'd known my whole life. Caleb sat beside me, his leg bouncing nervously, his hand brushing against mine on the wooden bench. When his name was called, he rose slowly, every eye in the room following him like he was walking to his own execution. He stood at the front, cleared his throat, and let silence stretch until the whispers stopped. "My name is Caleb Turner," he began, his voice steady but low. "And I'm here tonight because I can't keep living a lie." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw Mrs. Henderson clutch her pearls. Hank, sitting in the back, smirked like he'd been waiting for this. Caleb's gaze swept the room, then landed on me. His eyes softened, and when he spoke again, his words cut through the suffocating air. "I love Luke Harris." The room exploded. Shouts, accusations. Someone slammed a fist on a table. A woman stood and stormed out. The chaos was so loud it rattled my bones. But Caleb didn't waver. He kept talking, his voice rising above the noise. "For years, I let fear control me. Fear of this town, fear of my family, fear of myself. But I won't do it anymore. I won't be ashamed of who I am or who I love. Not for any of you. Not for anyone." And then, as if to seal it, he turned and held out his hand to me. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I stood, walked forward, and took his hand in mine. The room was spinning, voices shouting, but all I could see was him. We stood there together, hands clasped, defiant against a town that would rather see us broken than free. And for the first time, I believed we might actually survive this. But survival, I was about to learn, comes with a price. The silence after Caleb's words didn't last long. The room erupted like a powder keg, voices shouting, fists pounding on tables, accusations hurled like stones. Someone called us sinners. Another shouted that Caleb had disgraced his family. A man near the back muttered that we should leave town altogether, and the way others nodded told me he wasn't alone in thinking it. But Caleb didn't flinch. His hand in mine stayed steady, grounding me even as my knees wanted to give out. "I know some of you will never accept me," Caleb said, raising his voice above the clamor. "But I won't spend another day hiding in shame because of your fear. I love Luke, and nothing you say, no scripture you twist, no threat you make will change that." The shouting grew louder, but then out of nowhere a voice rose above it all. "I believe him." Heads turned. At the far side of the room, Mrs. Alvarez, the town librarian, small and gray-haired, who'd lived here longer than anyone, stood with her cane in hand. Her eyes were sharp, unwavering. "I believe him," she repeated, "and I'm proud of him for saying it." The room shifted, the anger faltering as confusion slipped in. And then, slowly, another voice joined hers. "He's right," someone else said, Caleb's old football teammate of all people. "They're not hurting anyone." It wasn't everyone, not by a long shot, but it was enough to cut through the wall of hate. The meeting ended in chaos, with some people storming out, others whispering furiously, and a handful quietly watching us with something almost like respect. When it was over, Caleb and I walked out together into the cool night, the air electric with everything that had just happened. He exhaled, his grip on my hand finally loosening. "I thought they were going to tear me apart in there." I turned to him, my chest aching with pride. "You were incredible." He shook his head, laughing shakily. I was terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, I said softly. It's choosing love anyway. For the first time in weeks, his smile reached his eyes. But the days that followed weren't easy. The town was split right down the middle, some openly hostile, others quietly supportive, most somewhere in between. Caleb's parents refused to speak to him. My uncle wouldn't look at me. But there were small mercies. Mrs. Alvarez stopped by the garage with cookies. Caleb's old teammate came to help fix his truck and shook both our hands firmly before leaving. Change wasn't sweeping and sudden. It was slow, fragile, fought for inch by inch. And yet, in the quiet of our nights together, something inside us shifted. We no longer whispered our love in the dark. We kissed in the grocery store parking lot. We held hands walking down Main Street. Sometimes people stared, sometimes they scowled, but sometimes, just sometimes, someone smiled. The first time Caleb's father saw us again was outside the church one Sunday. He stopped, his eyes hard as stone. Caleb stiffened beside me, bracing for the blow. But instead, his father just shook his head and muttered, "You're still my boy," before walking away. It wasn't forgiveness, not really. But it was something. Months passed. The sharp edges of the town's anger dulled, worn down by time and the undeniable truth that we weren't going anywhere. People got used to us the way they got used to a new stop sign, grumbling at first, then slowing down, then forgetting why they were angry in the first place. And one golden evening, as the sun dipped low over the fields, Caleb pulled me out to the porch of our small rented house. His hands were shaking, but his eyes burned with the same fire I'd seen the night he stood in front of the whole town. "I've spent too many years hiding," he said, voice rough. "Too many years afraid. But with you, I don't want to be afraid anymore." I blinked, confused, until he dropped to one knee. My breath caught. "Caleb," he smiled, nervous and hopeful all at once. "Luke Harris, will you marry me?" The world blurred, my vision swimming with tears. I didn't care that the neighbors might see, or that the town would have something else to gossip about. All I saw was him, the boy I'd loved since I was 16, the man who had finally chosen love over fear. "Yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Yes." He slipped the simple silver band onto my finger, and when he stood to kiss me, the world seemed to exhale around us. We weren't fixed. The town wasn't perfect. The road ahead would still be hard. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Because for the first time, love wasn't a secret. It was ours out loud, for everyone to see. And that, I realized, was enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.